Hi everybody, we're in my studio now and I'm going to do some drawing exercises to get us started. First, I just want to say thank you for posting responses to the discussion questions that I had added to the discussion area in Blackboard. So it just gives me a chance to get to know each one of you because this asynchronous learning is new to me, but what I get most out of is working as directly with students as possible. And I would just want each and every one of you to know that you're here to learn to draw the figure, and I hope that I can connect with you in whatever meaningful way that I can. And one of those is the questions that you responded to. So that being said, some of you are less familiar with drawing the figure or are new to drawing altogether. So we're going to start out with some real basic exercises because I wouldn't want to take somebody who has little to no experience in drawing and throw them right into doing the figure right from the beginning. So you know there we can kind of work our way up there in the first week or so. Okay, so I have this setup right here with my drawing pad, and I also want to share with you this awesome cup that I got over the Christmas break. It is handmade, even though it looks really slick, and it says, "I will teach you in a room. I will teach you now on Zoom. I will teach you in a house. I will teach you with my mouse. I will teach you here or there. I will teach because I care." Isn't that awesome? Okay, so I'm keeping that next to me because it just reminds me of what I'm doing and how we're going to try to connect and give each other the best educational experience, because I'm going to learn from you too during this kind of unprecedented time. Okay, so for people who haven't been drawing as much or are relatively new to it, I would like you to start with doing some still lifes. And that's just interesting shaped objects around the house. And everything that is in the world around us, including the body and the face, can be broken down into basic shapes. And that's the general framework of how we approach any drawing, is reducing things to simple shapes. And if you're new to drawing, then start out with drawing simple objects and fill a few pages of little sketches in your book or in your drawing pad of just sketches of basic objects around the house, just to get used to it, because you're also not setting the bar for success so high. Like, if you've never drawn the figure before and then you try to draw one in like a fairly complicated pose, then it's probably not going to turn out the way you wanted and you might get discouraged. So I would like you to set the bar low to begin with. I could say a lot about drawing in general. I I would just say this: it's a thing that a lot of people find to be very mysterious, and they feel like they either have it or they don't. And it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time. For example, if you I feel like if you took the average person off the street and got them and asked them how long would it take you to draw to play the piano, and I feel like a lot of people would say 2 or 3 years of constant practice, and then it wouldn't sound so bad, because it's going to sound really bad to begin with. And then the the responses that I've gotten from asking people about drawing or hearing people's comments when they see me draw over the years has always been things like, "I can't draw a straight line. I can only draw stick figures. I could never ever draw because I just don't have it in me." Well, you know, if it's a skill that you haven't been using since you were 12 years old, you are more than likely still at a 12-year-old level, if not younger than that, because it's not a muscle that you've been flexing for that long. So why would you expect to suddenly be able to draw like a 25 or 30-year-old that's been practicing it for 15, 20 years, right? So here's a cup. Got my charcoal pencil. Practice drawing vertical lines, curves. Keep your arm loose. So even though this other curve back here is hidden, I'm going to draw it anyway. And when we're drawing an ellipse, you do the entire thing. You don't just like... You see how I made one line and then another line? And what happens is you get this point on the side. And you don't want that, because on a mug, even on the side, there is a tight curve. So just something to keep in mind if you're using a cup or any other cylindrical object as your model, is making a full ellipse, and then now I'm going a little fast because I don't want people to spend longer watching videos than I have to, because while we're just getting started in this course, I did a video on my studio and sketchbooks, and then the materials, then crash course, and I'm going to post one on the assignment. So it's quite a bit of things to watch to get us started. So just bear with me. I'm trying to give you the most bang for your buck to get the course going. But fortunately for you, you can rewind stuff and watch it later. And I've posted a lot of links to other YouTubers that have been doing online drawing teaching longer than I have. I've only been working in classrooms up till last year. So there are a lot of links out there, and I'm just not going to be the only source. I'm going to try to give you as many tools as possible to help you out. Okay. Hold on a second. I'm getting interrupted. Okay. That's the dangers of teaching at home, is I got interrupted by one of my children, and I said, sorry, I'm shooting a video, I gotta go. Okay, so, yeah, so still lifes, you want to break everything down into basic shapes. And I wouldn't worry too much about shading right now. We are going to talk a little bit about shading soon, but the key thing I want you to work on in this first couple weeks is really looking very, very carefully at objects. In Blackboard, I posted a link that I said great essay, or I titled it Great Essay How to Draw by Spoonbard, which is the username for this illustrator that I really like. And if you haven't watched that or read that 15-minute essay, read it now, and then pause the video, go read it, come back, because that video or that essay covers a lot of things that I already think about when I'm trying to understand how people learn to draw, and a lot of it is observation. So you don't, of all the things that a person wants to draw in the world, including the body and the figure, you don't have this amazing database of very, very detailed information on what things look like. For example, if you know your best friend or your partner, you know what their face looks like, but how well could you draw it from memory? Could you draw their hands, their specific hands from memory? Probably not, because you've never had to study it in that amount of detail, even if you've seen that person hundreds of times. So learning to observe things very, very carefully is the key to drawing, and doing it over and over and over. Okay, so I think that there are things like natural talent in anything, but natural talent doesn't go very far without applied repetition of developing a skill. So when I'm looking at this thing, I'm looking at the proportions of the width in comparison to the height. How far does this stick out? Is this, you know, even on the top versus the bottom? When I look at it, it actually looks like the bottom part is fatter than the top part. You know, how fat is that part? How skinny is that part? So when I compare it to this drawing, which I didn't really do, you know, directly observing the mug, I was just drawing a kind of a cup-shaped object out of my memory. But when I compare them, actually this drawing is too tall, and it's probably shaped a little bit more like this. And it's probably shaped a little bit more like this. So when you're sketching, you want to do really light gestural lines. In architectural drafting, we call those construction lines, and they're very, very light lines like this. And then as you start finding the lines that are going where you want them to be, then you slow down and you can make them darker. Okay. I am going to do a little bit of shading. I can't resist. If you look in my sketchbooks, or if I show you one day when I'm doing another video, or if you visit me during my office hours and I can flip through my sketchbooks, you'll see a lot of still lifes in there. A lot of days when I was sitting around at school doing nothing in between classes, and I would just put something in front of me, or I'd draw somebody sitting on a couch, or I would draw the inside of the bus while I was riding the bus. And I just did this over and over and over, and just through repetition it gets better. So here's a pencil sharpener. It's basically a box-shaped object, but the top is narrower than the bottom, and the top is cylindrical, where the bottom is closer to being a box shape. So if I place that there, and I look at it this way, it's a little tricky to, you're not going to be able to see it exactly from my point of view right here, but what you want to do with the very first few lines is get the overall shape. You do not do any details. Okay? And that applies for drawing landscapes, architecture, people, animals, everything. You just, this stuff, loose gestural lines. If you look up drawing videos on YouTube, or go to any other drawing class, this is generally what people recommend. I have seen other approaches, but this is the one that works for most learners, and it's what I've been doing for about 25 years. I've been holding the pencil so far in the writing grip. This is the overhand grip like this, where you actually kind of hold the tool from the top, and it does work pretty well for when you're drawing on a vertical surface. So like this. It's kind of like the pencil becomes like more of an extension of your arm. because it runs this way, as opposed to something that your fingers are holding like this at a kind of an angle, more like a mechanical support. So it feels weird at first, but try it out and you might get used to it, especially when you're standing back and going like this. After a while you get used to it. It's not for doing precise details like this, it's for doing large, big marks. Okay, so try that out. Doing a still life, I might stick to the writing grip. So if you hold the pencil with the overhand grip like this, and then the angle at which it interacts with the drawing surface is it's a smaller angle, like probably if you were to measure that like 10 degrees or something like that, as opposed to a writing grip which is closer to like 50 degrees, 60 degrees. It's very far out from the paper. So when you hold it like this, then the mark that you make is bigger, right? It's fatter. And you can shade like that, right? And in this case, I am shading in the direction at which this plane, this surface runs. And it creates some depth, but it also tells the viewer the nature of that plane, and so it becomes more sculpture, more three-dimensional. And then if I start going like this, then I'm starting to kind of carve the shape around the top as it curves like that. So I'll get into that more later, but I'm just kind of showing you a few different techniques. Depending on what your skill level is, then if you already feel pretty comfortable at capturing general shapes of objects and you're ready to get into shading, that's, that would be the next step. Okay, so there's my pencil sharpener. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Here's something a little bit more complicated, a pair of earmuffs. And so I'm going to get another sheet of paper. And then I'm just going to secure it back here with a bulldog clip. And then I'll just do one more still life. Slightly more complicated object. And what this requires is just really, really careful observation and knowing that the first shapes that you put down probably won't be where they need to go. So think of it this way. I'm going to switch to my compressed graphite crayon. Some of the lines that you put down when you're initially finding out where your eventual drawing is going to end up, some of those lines, their purpose is not to show where the object is. Their purpose might be to lead you to where the final lines actually are going to end up, because you're going to keep comparing the actual object to your drawing and going, well, does that look right? No, yes, no. And kind of analyzing the edges of all those shapes. And you're going to redraw where those lines end up many times. Don't get frustrated, because you have to work through this process. Everybody does. I am breaking this entire thing down into basic shapes. Like this, like this. See how drawing with this, you just get like a much softer line with it's more tonal based. And if I use just the edge, I can get a sharp line, but when it's fairly blunt right now, so I have to really use a point to make a line like that. But if I have a lot of the edge engaged with the paper, then it makes a fatter, softer line. Okay, so this, I'm not going to make this too detailed. What we're trying to do is just capture the general shape of things. And the one earmuff here is overlapped by the other one, but I'm going to just draw right through it as if everything was made out of wires or glass, so you could just see through things. And that's just going to help me get the correct shape. And if you keep your lines light enough, then when you do the other forms on top, you're working from the back of the drawing outwards. Then when you do the other forms on top and you make them darker, then these lines will recede. You could erase them, but I don't actually encourage too much erasing. I think you should try to avoid erasing. It's sort of a last case, like a last resort. If you keep your lines very loose and gestural like this, and then the lines that you decide that you want to keep, you make them darker, then not only do the light lines recede and disappear, but it actually gives the entire drawing a lot more energy and it's more exciting to look at. So I don't actually encourage a lot of erasing. So it's not a good habit. I mean, there are some things where you do need to erase, like if I'm trying to produce a very tight finished illustration and I want kind of like a cartoon, and I don't want to have any of this kind of gestural texture, then yeah, I would erase them, but that's not what we're going for right now. When you're trying to do these gestural lines, you try to keep your entire arm moving, like big sweeping motions, okay? So just practice this. I've heard it said by some teachers and artists that sometimes before you start a drawing session, do a couple pages of just this, you know. If you use this on the side, you can block in a big area of tone. But start a page of just doing this, because this might just free you up, get your head into the mode of just making marks, because you can't screw this up. This is kind of like the equivalent of doing stretching before yoga or before doing a big hike, is just make marks like this and practice, you know, see what this feels like. Try to make as many different types of marks as possible. You know. Okay. Those are my gestural unfinished hearing protectors for the woodshop. And if you're new to drawing, I suggest working on this every day, 15 minutes for a week, and hopefully getting into drawing the figure or the portrait won't be as intense once you know, get a bunch of still lifes done. Okay, thus concludes my crash course in drawing still lifes.